Welcome back everybody to my coverage of F1 2018 testing week 1. This is going to be my review of the first week of testing. It was alright, wasn't it? It wasn't too bad. A bit of drama, which we don't usually see in testing, and I think every day pretty much something different was going on, which was quite nice to see, quite interesting to see. But what I'm going to do today is go through each team individually, give a score, because I love to give scores on this channel. If you didn't know, I do love to whack a score on the end of things, out of 10, how each team performed this week. So let's start off with the reigning champions, Mercedes. 306 laps in total, the second most of any team, and 212 laps from Valtteri Bottas himself was the third most of any driver. They were on top on one day, which was yesterday, the 4th day of testing. Lewis Hamilton set the fastest time of practice overall with that time, with a 1:19.333. And a bit of interesting sort of statistic there as well, is that that's the first time Hamilton's topped a practice session or a testing session since 2010. Since 2010, that's ridiculous. That's 8 seasons he's not been at the top of the timings in a practice or testing session. That is mental. That really blew my mind, that did. But a solid week from Mercedes so far. Solid running, as I said, the second most laps in total, the fastest lap of all, no issues whatsoever. And so I'm going to give them a 9 out of 10 for Mercedes. Really solid week from the reigning world champions. We move on then to Ferrari, the runners-up last season with Sebastian Vettel, and in the constructors they had the third most laps in testing with 298, but Sebastian Vettel had the second most laps in testing for a single driver with 218, which means Raikkonen only did 80 laps himself. They were second on most days, but on day 2 they were top. Vettel has the second fastest lap so far with a 1:19.6, but that is a compound harder than Hamilton's. On the second day of practice they were fastest with Sebastian Vettel, who's got the second fastest lap of practice so far with a 1:19.6, which is 3/10 slower than Hamilton's fastest time. However, Hamilton was also on a harder compound than Vettel, so again, I've said this all week, you can't really judge the timings too much because teams obviously hide a lot of their performance. Only one minor issue for Ferrari this week, which was Sebastian Vettel's spin in the first 2 corners. But apart from that, a solid week from the Ferrari, and I'm going to give them a 9 out of 10, the same as I've given Mercedes. Red Bull then, had a lot to prove this year, they still do, but they've pretty much got a mountain to climb already. On the back foot, not the best start to testing at all, only 209 laps completed, which is about 100 fewer than Mercedes, and they've completed the 8th most laps of any team so far. Okay, only 2 teams have completed fewer laps than Red Bull, which isn't great so far. And neither of their drivers are in the top 10 most laps by a single driver, so it's not great, is it, from Red Bull so far? They were top on day 1 though, which is a bit of a saving grace, and Ricciardo has the 4th fastest time overall with a 1:20.1. Verstappen had big issues yesterday, only completing 35 laps, and that's really why Red Bull were on the back foot, because obviously they had no running on Wednesday because of the snow on day 3. So Red Bull, the past 2 days, it hasn't been great at all, and so unfortunately for Red Bull, I'm going to only have to give them a 5 out of 10 because there's no real argument. If they want to be fighting for this World Championship, they have to do more than 209 laps, and in this second week of testing they're really going to have to step it up if they want to be winning that first race in Melbourne on the 23rd of March. The next team on my list is Force India, and they had a great season last season, a great season the season before, but what a dreadful start they've had to testing. Only 166 laps. That's nearly half the amount of Mercedes. It's the least of all, the 9th best lap overall with a 1:21 from Ocon, but there seems to be no apparent issues with any of the cars. Or at least that they've come out and said. There was a spin from Mazepin on Monday, their reserve driver that they brought in, as Latifi would not be taking part this week. But apart from that, it's been what seems to be plain sailing, but just a real lack of running from Force India. There seems to be a lot of change going on behind the scenes. Obviously Vijay Mallya's got this big court case going on, and they're having a big rebranding going on. So maybe that could be taking away from some of their on-track action, but it's not good enough from Force India at all. And I've predicted them to have a big drop this season in the standings, and currently they're only backing up what my initial thoughts were, because this isn't good enough from Force India. And if they want to be fighting for that 4th position this season, they're going to have to do much better the second week, just like Red Bull. And Force India, I'm giving a 3 out of 10 for their efforts this week. Again, it would be lower, but for no apparent big issues, we'll have to let them off. We'll have to give them a few points, so 3 out of 10 for Force India. Williams is next on my list with 276 laps completed, the 5th most. But I tell you what, from about 4th to 7th, all those cars there, the difference between laps is about 10 between each of them. So nothing really major there from Williams. 3 drivers they had out this week in the form of Lance Stroll, Sergei Sorokin and Robert Kubica. Stroll definitely looked the quickest of the 3 of each session he took part in. And Stroll has the 7th fastest lap overall with a 1 minute 21.1. Again, there seems to be no issues from Williams, a really solid week from them. I'm going to give them a 7 out of 10. There's not really a lot to talk about with Williams really, just a solid week so far, and hopefully they can continue that solidness in next week. That was really bad English saying solidness and in next week, but we'll have to move on. Renault then. Okay, so they've completed the 6th most laps of any team with 273, but both drivers were very, very consistently in the top 5 on each day, except that 3rd day where they did no running at all. Nico Hülkenberg has the 6th fastest time overall with a 1 minute 20.5, which is only just a second above Hamilton's time. But like I said, both drivers looking really promising for this season. I've said it most days that Hülkenberg and Sainz is one of the best lineups on the grid, and Renault are going to get an 8 out of 10. I'm very impressed with Renault. Really solid, very quick, no issues. Impressed. 8 out of 10 for Renault, good job from them. Okay, so the big mover this season, or the big change this season, is Toro Rosso. And when I say the big change, I mean the fact that they've got a Honda engine. And for some, if you're new to the sport, you won't really know about why that's such a big change. Although if you're new to the sport, I doubt you're going to be watching a winter testing video. However, Toro Rosso moving to the Honda engine, everyone expected them to be awful this season. And Toro Rosso, with 324 laps completed, have completed the most laps of any team in testing. What a sublime effort that is. Really incredible from Toro Rosso. Gasly himself has 229 laps, which is more than Force India have done. And it's more than Red Bull have done. Just Gasly. I mean, fantastic. They've only got the 8th fastest time overall with a 1 minute 21. But that doesn't matter at this point for Toro Rosso. And we know that Honda engine isn't the quickest. However, reliability seems to be very promising with no issues at all from Toro Rosso. And they are also going to get a 9 out of 10 for their efforts this week. Great job from them. No issues. Gasly and Hartley both look solid. Both pretty much rookies, both in their rookie season. Very, very impressive. Toro Rosso, big thumbs up from me. Haas is next on the list, a team I've been critical of recently because of their uninspiring livery, shall we say. I'm not a huge fan of it. I've given them a 4 out of 10, going straight to that ranking there. They've got the 2nd least laps of any team with 187, and 132 of those are just Kevin Magnussen, so Grosjean has had very limited running, only a handful of laps, 55, 56 there. Not great from Romain Grosjean, and all these laps, I will just say now quickly, are timed laps, so different sources will say different things. I've got these from the official F1 page, so I think that's the most reliable source of information at this moment in time. They've got the 5th fastest lap overall with Magnussen with a 120, but that was on the super soft. And so Haas, again, just same as Force India, they've done this big speech about moving forward once again, but how can they go forward if they're not going to test the car? 187 laps, it's just not good enough. It really isn't. And you see the bottom 3 teams, Haas, Force India and Red Bull, are miles away in terms of laps completed. They really are. And Haas, again, it didn't seem like they had many issues, but they just didn't put the car out on track enough. And it's another team where next week they will have to perform if they want to be at the front next season, or not at the front because that's a big overestimation there, but if they want to be fighting higher up the grid than they were last season. And they're a team that I've predicted won't be. They're a team that I've predicted will be 9th. And once again, they're backing up my opinion. They really are. They're poor from Haas. 4 out of 10. I'm even considering a 3. But 187 laps is a bit more convenient than 166 that Force India did. McLaren then, another team that's had a bit of a shuffle this season with the Renault engine. And it didn't start off well, did it? With that big tyre failure from Alonso on day 1, meaning his day was almost ruined. On day 2, Vandoorne had his rear diffuser exploding, not very fun at all. And then on day 3, they did actually get the fastest time on day 3, so they have topped the session with Fernando Alonso, but they were the only team to really do any running with 11 laps on that day. However, they do have 260 laps under their belt, which, to be honest, considering 3 days without doing anything, isn't too bad at all. That's only 38 less than Ferrari. So McLaren, that's actually quite a solid job considering all the issues they've had. Fastest lap of their whole week was from Vandoorne, and that's the 3rd fastest lap overall with a 1:19.8. But again, that one's a bit, can't really take it too reliably as Vandoorne was on the hypersofts. But again, it could be a quick lap in terms of he could have really been slowing down, he could have been on a really quick lap. And again, sandbagging all the time. So you just don't know how good that lap was, how poor it was, if engine moans were turned up or turned down. But McLaren, a poor start to the week, which will take off some of their score, but a really solid end. So I'm going to give them a 7 out of 10 for that solid end and really turning around those problems. I mean, again, McLaren have had all those options pretty much 3 days without running, and they've still done more laps than Red Bull, Haas and Force India. So again, you can see in why I'm slating into those other teams, because McLaren have had a really tough week, but they've really turned it around. 7 out of 10 for McLaren, a great job from them and a great start almost to their partnership with Renault. There seems to be no issues there with the engine. Our final team then to cover for this week, before I'll give you a rest for the weekend, it's Formula E though this weekend, so Formula 1 will be on the back burner for once this week, is Alfa Sauber. So they've got the now very experienced Marcus Ericsson, one of the most experienced drivers on the grid actually now, which is quite strange considering he's always been in back market teams. Anyway, we move on. They completed the 4th most laps of any team, which is pretty solid, only 15 less than Ferrari, with 283 laps, so solid from Alfa Sauber. They had spins from both their drivers, Ericsson and Leclerc, although Leclerc was more just a trip to the gravel, but no major issues really. Ericsson did 143 laps, Leclerc did 140, so a really nice balance there for both drivers. They had the 10th fastest lap overall with Charles Leclerc with a 122, which again, it's not great, but you can't tell if that's representative of any times, and so I'm going to give them a 7 out of 10. Solid from Alfa Sauber. There's a big article again up on the Formula 1 page. I don't know why I'm using them so much today, but I just was. A big article about Marcus Ericsson saying how difficult it is implementing Alfa Romeo into that team. Something which I hadn't really considered too much. I mean, the idea was Alfa Romeo was just going to be a title sponsor, but now it seems Alfa Romeo are having a much bigger impact than most people first thought. So again, Alfa Romeo, I'm really liking what they're doing to Sauber, and I think with the implementation of Charles Leclerc into that team, they could be really promising this season. So 7 out of 10 for Alfa Sauber, it's not a bad effort from them. So there you have it, there was my roundup of week 1 of testing for Formula 1 2018 season. Not a bad week at all, and there's some high scores in there. Mercedes, Ferrari and Toro Rosso all getting 9s out of 10, but Red Bull, Force India and Haas still with work to do, with 3s and 4s and 5 scores respectively. Not great from them, is it, at all, especially as some of them are aiming for top places in that championship. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed today's video. Like I said, Formula 1 will be on a little bit of a shutdown for this weekend as Formula E is here, and if you guys are not aware, I cover all Formula E and Formula 1 news, and I do reviews for both Formula 1 and Formula E races. So if you want to check that out this weekend, you can do. The race is on at 9:30 on Channel 5 Spike in the UK. If you fancy watching that, it's on the Freeview, so you don't have to pay for anything. It's usually good racing Formula E, and I would recommend giving that a little view. But guys, if you have enjoyed, like, subscribe, thanks for watching. I mean, emphasising the thanks there as well, because this week you guys have been absolutely on fire. So again, thank you so much. I won't beg you to subscribe today, just a thanks from me will do. And as always guys, I'll see you in the next one.